Hello and welcome back everyone to Blended Geometry Nodes workshop for Jungle Vines. In the last lesson we left ourselves off with a couple of leaves being stuck out from the curvature itself, but as you can see it's not quite right. If I were to change the scale that's closer to 0, you'll notice that it's actually going, well, that's a little bit too close to 0. Let me just go ahead and do that. You'll notice that they go closer to the centerpieces of the curvature, but as we go further from them, you'll notice that they're going off from the center. So we need to go ahead and fix that. And we also, the same goes for the rotation as well. You can see that they're almost using one, if I were to use X, it might be a little bit more visible. They're using as one origin in a way. So we need to make sure we fix that as well. And actually it is quite an easy fix. All we gotta do is just, we need to simply tick on reset children. It'll reset the local transformations. The reason we're doing this is because when we had the leaves on, for the presentation purposes, we had them separated out like this. But if you'd have all of them in one location, so something like, I could actually show you even, if you'd have all of them in location, if I were to click Shift and S to get all of my objects to 3D cursor, which happens to be in world position, I can get selection cursor. And by simply doing that, I wouldn't really need the reset to children. I would be able to just scale it outwards and now rotate it, and all of them would behave in exactly the right way. But again, because we're doing with the presentation, I'm just going to go ahead and use it like so. And that will give us the right setup. So now that we have the reset children ticked on, we should be able to, there you go, rotate it around. And now everything is being basically rotated locally. Everything is also being scaled locally as well. So all of them are in a position. All right, now that we have this sorted, let's go ahead and actually get ourselves a nice scaling parameters. So we'll get ourselves similar parameters as we did previously. If we were to, let me just go ahead and look. I think, yeah, I forgot to restart this. So I'm just going to hover over, click at backspace, and that's going to restart the default name of leaves. And the next thing is, again, we're going to set ourselves up with the scaling parameters. So let's go ahead and do that. We're going to click on the plus symbol. We're going to add an input, and we're going to actually add another one right away. Input, so 2 inputs like so. One is going to be called, if we double click on it, we're going to call this scale. And another one, we're going to call it scale randomness. So we're going to be setting those up to help us with the scale. So first things first, we're going to get ourselves a group input, which I believe we can just use this one over here. Should be all right. Let's go ahead and do that. Actually, I'm just going to move collection info to the top. That's a little bit to the bottom, and there we go. For the scale, we're going to grab ourselves a simple add value. So we're just going to directly get ourselves mass value like so. And we're going to add it in as the default value, which we're then going to be people plugging it in into the scale. And I will right away actually change the scale, the default value to set to 1, or actually, sorry, 0.1. I think that'll be all right. Going to go ahead and delete the original value over here. So it's actually set for the parameter of 0.1. And let me just go ahead and delete the values for adding set to 0. And now we can go ahead and actually get ourselves a randomness for the value. So just like we did previously, we're going to grab ourselves a random value like so. We're going to again set this from -1 to 1, and that's going to be multiplied basically with the scale randomness, and it's going to give us a very, very nice range. So we can actually just make use out of this math node. We're going to hit Shift D to duplicate this. And I just made a mistake. I'm going to click Ctrl Z real quick just to add it, to make sure it's not added onto the node itself. We're going to just combine these two together, scale randomness and random value. And we're going to change this to multiply. So now it's going to give us, again, a good range. And then afterwards, we're just going to add this value to this section. So just like that, we can now go ahead and actually test these values out. I'm going to set the default value to 0.5 just so we could see the leaves a little bit better, or actually 0.3. There we go. Now we can change the scale randomness, and there we go. We're going to get ourselves a very, very nice randomization. So by default, we can leave it as something 0.1. like so, as the leaves themselves already have a bit of scale variation, so doesn't need to go too far in regards to the scale randomness itself. I think that's going to be quite all right. Okay, so we of course need to randomize the rotation as well. And for us to do that, we're simply going to use a random value again. In this case, though, we're not going to use a float value. We're going to use a vector value. So if we were to just click Shift and A, search for random value, we're going to add this in here. Oh, a little bit off to the side. Let me just move this a little bit downwards like so. So we'd be able to fit this in. And we're going to change this from float to a vector value since we need to rotate it in multiple random directions. And for the minus, we're going to click and hold the left mouse button. We're going to drag it across downwards, and then we're going to click -1, which will internally change everything to -1 in this section. Then we're going to go ahead and connect the value to rotation. And just like that, we're going to get ourselves those randomly rotated leaves. So it's already looking pretty nice. Although the scale is a little bit too large, for example, maybe I'll just lower it down and increase the density a little bit to something like 0.4. There we go. I think that's much better. Now, here's the thing. When we want to make use out of the setup, if we want to have, if we want to convert this to a mesh, when we do that for a geometry node, usually all the assets that don't have the mesh setup will just simply disappear. And what I mean by that is, if we have this selected, I can click Shift D to duplicate it, just to show you as an example. This will duplicate everything with the geometry node itself. And now what I can do is just, I can go to Object, convert this to an object, convert this to a mesh, that is, which will basically take everything, the information from the mesh, from the geometry, and just put it as a simple asset, as a simple mesh. We can go ahead and click on it, and then you'll see that those leaves actually disappeared. The reason the curve stayed was because it was already a mesh. So if we have a look at over here, we already created a curve to mesh. So it was already able to just convert that to a simple geometry. So we click tab, we can see that there is a geometry. But the leaves themselves, they don't classify as a mesh. So that's going to be an issue for us when we want to actually set it up for like just a simple geometry. So we could actually modify it, manipulate it after using geometry itself. So actually, this is quite an easy fix. All we gotta do is simply realize this to a mesh. So what I mean by that is there is a very nice and simple type of a node. If we click Shift and A, we can search for realize instances, and this will take any geometry that we have, basically any instances, and it'll convert this to a geometry. So now when we actually duplicate this and convert this to a mesh, we can see that all of those leaves actually stayed behind for us. We can see that we can manipulate them and whatnot. We can grab some of them and we can just do what we want with them. So that is pretty nice for us. All right, so just in case, we made sure we do that in case and I just realized that I don't really like how it actually rotates. I don't think it's rotating full way in regards to all of its values. So if I were to, for example, change the minimum value to -10, it would give us more of randomness in regards to its rotation. So we don't have enough randomness. So actually, in this particular case, what we're going to do is we're going to use a value of pi. The reason being is that it's just going to give us a full 360 rotation across our leaves, and it's just going to give us basically more randomness for the setup. So it's actually quite easy to make use out of. If we write within the value pi, we can click enter, and that's going to give us exact value of pi, and it's just going to max out the digits over here. So that's going to be pretty nice. So in this particular case, what we're going to do is we're just going to select this. For the minimum range, we're going to do -pi, like so. And for the maximum range, we're going to do pi, just like that. And there you go. That's going to give us more randomness for the leaves. Now we also have to work on in regards to the scaling. So what I mean by that is the scaling randomness is there, but we want the leaves to be shrinking down to be smaller as we go approach the smaller values over here, smaller branches. So we are going to be working on that in the next lesson. Thank you so much for watching, and I will be seeing you in a bit.